Check one, two, two, one, two, two, three, rolling. So if you're just chiming in from the 100 grand at a single bodega for something of a Secret Service position of a person my age that was born in Iraq and flew over 3 months before the attacks on the Manhattan and the Pentagon, or the Pentagon and Manhattan, as well as that one crash in the West. If you're just chiming in from 100 grand at one station, a bodega, for anything but gasoline, I spent on natural American spirits, and I spent on Red Bull. It was two 8.8 ounces, or the two 8 point something ounces, and one pack every 24 hours for about just under 10 years. And then the ATF did an audit, and they asked me 20 questions, and they said, are you suicidal? Are you affected from tobacco? Are you asking for a long, prolonged death from tobacco and Red Bull? And I answered the 20 questions correctly, and I'm still allowed to shop there. And that one particular attendant that was born in Iraq and worked there for about a decade is no longer an employee there. And I was told he hasn't been there for over 6 weeks consecutive. I was told he hasn't been there for over 2 months. I was told that he bought a house down south the Mason-Dixon line and is elsewhere for quite some long while and will probably never be an employee there ever again. So there was that, and that's why I've brought that up a couple times. And if you're just tuning in from that, or something about 775 fights in the bare knuckle military boxing ring from ages perhaps from ages 13 till 18. 28, ages 13 to 28. I think is what it was, and supposed 800 fights, almost just closer to 775 or 800 confirmed something. With PD assists time 25 or something similar. It was my the military liaisons and the military administration's liaisons and figureheads of highly decorated this and that, not my peers, were hoping to pay me veterans pay starting at the very latest of 2022 with my next state ID issue, $3,500 a month for the rest of my life. And then in 2022, my next state ID issue, a little American flag, and that would be the least they could do for my involvement in the WW3 since D-Day of September '01. And my story is I was on State Street and I disappeared. I was missing in action for hundreds of days. I was a refugee that was taken aboard a nuclear submersible that dipped in the trench. It went to the Long Island Sound Underwater Research Facility. It parked in the Hudson in 2002, and I was there for that, and that. And then in late 2002, I was, and then I started in 2003 doing emergency services, life saving until 2008 as a 24/7 full time learn and work same time for 24/7 full time for a half a decade straight. I wound up with a head injury, and thankfully in 2006 I picked up a communication shift for the Green Party within vicinity of the Fort Trumbull nuclear submersible parking space, or the Fort Trumbull nuclear submersible vessel parking space at yeah, within vicinity. I was a 15-minute runaway, and then now for the past 400 days, I've been a half-hour runaway. And besides that, there was a Secret Service position, right, for the bodega, something. Now, all of the everything since the D days of '01s has been volunteer for volunteer wages. I've rarely held on the books job. Since 2008, it was dishwashing at Ocean Beach, and then I've had three on the books jobs since my first on the books apartment. Besides that, it was volunteer for volunteer wages. Now there was I mentioned senior citizens, yes, but what's more important is the centennial citizens. Senior citizens are over the age of 65, while a centennial citizen is close to the age of 100, say between 90 something, close to 95, say 94 and a half, or 95 to well over, until you're, say, 110, then you're a centennial decade or something similar. So there's that, and I know five or six, and there was one born between 1910 and 1920, and I'm not going to be very specific with their dates of birth, but there was Sal, there was Rosie, there was Andy, there was Larry. Oh, no, Larry was a little bit younger, but he fought in World War II as well. Sal, Rosie, Andy, Rob, and Edna. Now, Rob was a Green Beret that fought in World War II, and all five of those are still alive. Edna, Rob, Andy, Rosie and Sal. Andy and Rob are almost completely invisible to my eyes. I'm almost 100% blinded by them, and it's not because or from them. Generally at that age, if he doesn't want to be physically, technically visible on the books or somehow, alive as far as a technical, even though they're physically, biologically alive, they may have filed some sort of death certificates and checked out of public eye and doesn't want to be mentioned. So I've seen Edna recently driving around, so I doesn't know if that was her lucky out time so she could visit her best friend's great grandson. As far as Sal, say, I don't know if they've changed his birthday, so he's not that old. And as far as Andy from the Sea Cat and Rob, like I said, they probably doesn't want to be known as technically alive or in the public eye whatsoever. And there was one more, and it was Rosie, and her story was she was in Iwo Jima during World War II on an aircraft carrier, similar to the film Tora Tora Tora. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's about that. Now, my great grandmother was Phoebe Hoffman, Albert Hoffman's first cousin, born in Switzerland 2 years after Albert Hoffman. They were in the same family. That, like I said, first cousin, blood tied first cousin. They lived in the same house. Albert got a job at Sandoz in 1930 something. Phoebe got captured by Nazis in 1930 something, went through the Holocaust concentration camps, and then was saved by Americans and went to work in Manhattan, saving her refugee money, and then working over 40 years in New York City or Manhattan or so, to pass away in 2008 after investing most of her of all of her everything in the Hiltons and the Trumps. And when she became my great grandmother in 1990, when I was born, she got in touch with, say, Donald Trump's dad's wife, or something similar to Paris Hilton's granddad's wife, or something similar to both of them. And we kind of just pushed together Avinka and Paris with me at the shy age of me just being months old, being held by Brent Midland after birth announced to a live audience of 500,000 people, and on the radio and television and internets and etc. Being held by Brent Midland, and then being babysat by those two and more that were born in the early 80s. But those two were sort of a gift present for my great grandmother. And I'm 30 years of old. As a pretty EST age 30, and so it doesn't necessarily get babysat longer anymore. And I'm going to have to chime out, say, at about 3, 2, 1.